today's video, we're going to discuss the recall. So a recall is when you call your dog and he comes running to you with a lot of speed.
That's why we're discussing a recall, because that's not what happens. It's usually people have a problem with recalls, and this is even when they buy a trained dog. The dog can do the recalls for the trainer so really nicely. Then the dog goes to his home, or you go to a different area and you just practice at home. You just practiced your recalls and the dog doesn't listen to you. I think this is one of the most biggest or largest problems people suffer with is not suffer with, you can't say suffer, but suffer with. It's just like suffering when your dog doesn't come back to you when you recall it. I must say it is like suffering. So that is really one of the biggest things that everybody struggles with, is the recall. So how would you start training the recall?
Okay, so let's start with some common mistakes people make. First common mistake I always see people make is they never reward their dog for actually coming to them.
Yeah, there's no reason for the dog to come to them. Dogs don't understand the command of recall. They don't speak English. So by just calling your dog, there's no need for it to come to you. There's no reason for it to come to you. So it needs motivation to come to you. That kind of motivation can be from your excitement. And when the dog comes to you, it's usually like a praise with the hands. It's not good enough. There needs to be like food involved. So the reward needs to be big for the dog. The motivation needs to be big for the dog to come to you.
Yeah, so we usually start with as puppies. Lots of motivation, lots of little food, because puppies just depend a lot on their food. So we always have some treats with us. Every time we call our puppy, we give it some food. I think the most important thing and step that people miss sometimes is actually just teaching the dog its name and teaching it what it means to come to you. So it's one of the first things we'll do when we train puppies, is just call the puppy by its name, give it its treat when it gets to you. So that's very, very important. Okay, so having formal training sessions where you actually train the recall is important. From puppy to adult dog. So don't think, okay, my dog is an adult and I didn't do this as a puppy, that there's no saving.
It was this one and her sister that just ruined our video for us. Okay. But we'll continue.
Okay. Okay. Having, like I said, having formal training sessions where we practice it. So even for an adult dog, you can set these sessions up. So first important thing to remember when we do these sessions is to do it in the place where your dog is comfortable. So do it at home first. Don't go take your dog to a new place with all these distractions and then expect the dog to listen to you. It's not going to happen. So start at a familiar place like at home and get that recall going there first.
And create a habit out of it. And creating a habit is not 5 or 6 times. I heard somebody say now the other day, a habit forms in 21 days or 21 times, or but either or 21 times or whatever it is, it's a lot of time. So I would say 21 days of repetition of teaching your dog to come to you, knowing its name, doing it over and over and over and over, till you have where you just say the word come to me, or the dog's name, or whatever your command is here, or whatever, and the dog comes running to you at home. And then yet again, this does not mean that it's going to come to you when you go walking in the park. You're going to have a long leash on it, a long line, and then you're going to have to create the habit in the park as well. But yeah, you're going to have your long line, which is going to be your safety, or a little bit of a correction that you can tap it on so it brings it back to you.
I think the important things here, once again, to remember is have a good motivation, a good reason for your dog to come to you. So use a nice treat, something your dog really likes. So some cheese, Viennas, sausages, chicken, whatever works for you. Make sure your dog's hungry. So don't go work your dog in this exercise and has just had a full bowl of food. It's not going to work. So make sure the dog is hungry if you're going to use food, if your dog is at all food motivated. If not, it's not the end of the world. If your dog is toy motivated, that is also a very, very good motivation to use as a toy. And the toy can also, like when the dog comes to you, you can actually like throw the toy almost even as more as a reward. Second thing I would do is have control, in the sense of either have the dog in a confined area where it can't run off and do whatever it wants to, or have a long line on it. So a long line is what we call, or a puppy line, some people call it a puppy line, is something that's at least 5 to 10 meters. 10 meters are usually a bit difficult to work with, so that's maybe something you can progress to at a later stage. But usually we use about a 5-meter puppy line. So have some form of control. So if the dog doesn't come, you can actually coax it in towards you. The other
Or a
thing,
retractable leash. A nice retractable leash.
You can use a retractable leash for this exercise as well. So it is, do it in a confined area. Do it when the dog is hungry and motivated to do it, or do it for your toy. Or if you really have a dog that does not like a toy and also doesn't like food, then, and it's hopefully motivated by some affection, then that'll be your last resort, is just giving affection. So try to either use the food or the toy, preferably the food first. That's usually our go-to. But like I say, before you decide that your dog is not food motivated, make sure it's hungry.
Okay, so first thing first you're going to do is you're going to teach the dog its name, and by calling it in your kitchen, in a room when it's a puppy, by using the food and feeding that whole meal out of Fido come, walking backwards, Fido come, and it gets a little treat, and we're going to keep on doing that. Secondly, we're going to take that outside into a controlled area, maybe in your yard, where you're going to have maybe the dog run around, and you're going to do the same. You're going to be excited. The dog comes to you. You're going to give it the command, Fido, come. The dog gets a piece of food, and you're going to create a habit out of this, so that the dog, you will see when the dog understands what its name is. When you say that name, the dog will react and have a look at you. The dog will start, or immediately come to you. You'll see that the dog is starting to understand that. No dog learns it in 3 or 4 times or 5 days. You don't have a super dog. It just doesn't happen like that. You have to create a habit. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take a long line or a puppy line or a retractable leash, and then you're going to go and do exactly the same habit that you just created at home. You're now going to create in a park. Again, you're going to have a bag of treats, really, really nice treats. Might it be little sausages, cheese. They love liver treats. If you go onto YouTube or onto the internet and you go have a look at how to make some liver treats, they love liver treats. Make your own liver treats. That works very, very well. And you're going to create a habit with that as well. And I don't like dogs off leash when I'm in public, but if you do want to do it, make sure that you have at least habituated your dog to the command of coming to you before you let that dog off leash.
Yes, no off leash until it's 100% habit. Then we do the off leash. And remember now, when you move your dog to a different area, there's all these new motivations and stuff. So you really, really have to be important, and the dog must want to come back to you. So that brings me to another point, is the dog must want to come to you. The big mistake people make is they will call their dog, the dog won't come, or it's usually what happens, it's a panic situation. Like the gate is open, the dog's running out of the gate, there's traffic, you screaming at the dog, calling the dog's not coming to you. 5 minutes later, the dog comes back into the yard, comes to you, all happy to see you, and it gets a big punishment. So that is a normal thing that happens. I mean, or it's a normal human reaction to it. You're so frustrated and you were so worried about the dog, and you know the dog doesn't understand what could have happened, and the dog could have been dead, and you've got all these emotions that you have to deal with, and now the dog is just coming back to you, all happy to see you, and it gets a punishment. So in the dog's mind, all that's happening is when it eventually decides to listen, and it's out of that zone of running and not even hearing you, then when it does decide to come to you, it gets punished. So that's what the dog is going to remember, is I go to him or her and I get punished. So you need to think about these things, think before you do things, and try to think, how is the dog perceiving the situation that it's in and the situation that happened, not to your perspective, but through the dog's perspective.
Yeah, and dogs don't like to be cheated. So it's going to come to you once and it's going to get punished, and it's never going to come to you again. It just takes for that to happen once, and the dog won't come to you. It takes you 100 times to get your dog to come to you when you call it. And just by being an idiot once, by doing that, the dog associates that, well, I just came to it and I got a punishment, I'm not going to him again, so, or to her again. So be very, very careful of how you do it. That's why we say do it in a controlled area where you can always do it positive. Positive, positive, positive in the beginning. That's what you want to do till the dog understands the command and does it. When you just call that command, it runs to you and comes to you. That is what we're looking for before we can punish a dog for not listening.
Okay, so before your dog is going to listen to you in a stressful situation or this high excitement situations, you need to have a perfect recall just in normal situations before you can even attempt a stressful situation. Okay, so this is the way that we would start any dog. Doesn't matter if you have to go, if your dog had a good recall and you have to go back and do a new one, you can use this method as well. So then what you can, and if you have problem areas, like we mentioned the gate, this is where you can use extra tools like a long line, and then when the dog actually, you can coax it back, and when it actually comes back, it gets a reward from you, and you can set up the scenario. So if you have a specific problem, you can set up the scenarios, practice it with control until the dog understands it, and then move on to even more stressful or more places with more competitive motivators. Another thing you can do is actually have someone hold your dog and then you run away and call it. So that creates this excitement and need to go to you because you're going away and you're running away. So you can also bring in little games here where you actually run away and hide for the dog, and the dog comes and finds you, and it becomes a big game. So usually I've also seen that when people have a recall problem, it's usually only a part of the problem in general. If the dog is listening and being able to follow commands, usually it recalls. So it might be that you need to shape up everything, your obedience in general, and just make sure that the dog understands that recalls are compulsory and they have to come back to you. So in a situation where we start this from puppy, if we call the dogs and they don't come, we don't just let it go. We'll actually go there and fetch the dog and bring it back. We won't call the dog if we know that the dog might not come back to us, because now we create that command to just mean nothing, or the dog learns that it can not listen to the command. So make sure when you do give these commands that you are in a position to reinforce them. If don't recall the dog with your hands full of packets and you're not prepared to put them down to go and fetch the dog. So those are the kind of stuff that you have to think about and consider when it comes to a recall.
The other thing about recalls is I was laughing while she was saying that, and I was thinking maybe you should also look at yourself in the mirror and do a recall, and think of your puppy or your dog, and if you stand in the mirror and you say, Fido, come here, Fido, come here, he's not going to do it. There's no excitement. You have to create some excitement, maybe like a clown, higher pitched voice, Fido, come here, clap hands, run backwards, act like a clown. It's a puppy. Now it's excited. What's going on over here? And it runs back to you. So you're going to also need to have excitement in this. Remember, dogs communicate by body language, and they're going to want to see the body language and the excitement. It's not the verbal mouth that's coming out of your mouth, but it's how that verbal is coming out of your mouth, that excitement that is going to draw the dog to your attention to come to you.
Yes, and then remember that recalls should be practiced just like any other obedience command.
Over and over.
Yes, over and over. So setting aside time to actually work on your recall is extremely important. So you should see it as just important as your stays or as your sits or as your down. It's actually something you have to teach the dog to do. So don't forget that. Definitely.
Definitely.